Great. Welcome, everybody. This has been a wonderful event. At least for me, but I think for all of us, our brains are exploding with all of the nuance and things we've learned here. Um, okay. So we're presenting on 1UpHealth, and our basic product and service is a cloud-based Fire native platform that can be used for pretty much any form of modern computation, whether it's quality measurement, CQL, prior auth type of things. Um, and it also provides all of the data that payers need or providers might want for the CMS 0057 APIs. So the payer patient, payer provider, payer, right? In the cases when people are moving, let's say, between one MA plan to another Medicare Advantage plan. And finally, of course, electronic prior auth. So that's what we briefly want to talk about. Can we get the next slide, Jeremy? So the heart of this, we think, and this really just goes to the complexity we saw yesterday, is in the intelligent routing to maximize electronic prior auth. There are so many things involved, so many services, so many considerations um, that we need to really have that be um, a big consideration in how you think about prior auth. So we're going to talk about some of the, frankly, political things that all of us are going to have to deal with and that we can be smart about today. What that implies for a platform architecture, and then we're going to show you some product working. So the real problem to be solved here, obviously, we've had a great session on prior auth, but the country's unhappiness with things really goes beyond prior auth as just a simple process of the CRD and DTR and PAS and CDEX. It really is the entire process of what to authorize, and all of the bookkeeping and public mandated reporting around it. People are very unhappy about prior auth. So this is a big issue in Congress, and just a couple numbers to give people a focus on this. In Medicare Advantage, which is sort of ground zero for prior auth, there were 2 years ago, this is the latest data, a year and a half ago, there were 50 million prior auth decisions. So this is 1.8 decisions per beneficiary. You can do the math on how many beneficiaries, but that's a lot of votes to net it out. And a relatively small percent were denied. We don't really know what the volume of spend is. And most of those that were appealed were successfully appealed. But there's a lot of noise here. Medicare, the old fee-for-service, the classic Medicare, has a higher denial rate, but that's on a much, much narrower base of things. That's, your durable medical equipment. Think all the motorized wheelchairs that you see advertised on TV. So all of that, I think, suggests as we look to be really smart about organizationally what we do, that it's the entire pipeline that we should be optimizing here. And prior auth is really one part of the care process in the context of, plan risk management, network design, and of course the ongoing care coordination of care. And so if you look at it, I think what makes a lot of sense, we saw some incredible flow diagrams here in the last day of all of the pieces. But I think if you sort of step back one little bit, you can think of the pre-work, if you will, pre-prior auth. You can think of the prior auth execution, and then you can think of the post-work, because they're all going to use the same data and pretty much the same platform when you get right down to it. And so how do you know what the services are, who's going for which patients, which providers are you going to invoke here or have or put through the process? It can vary with things like gold carding. We've talked a lot about the execution, but as been mentioned a little bit, there are other things here like copays and deductibles. One of the things that we're going to show, Jeremy's going to show you here in a second, is many payers have multiple utilization management vendors and services. So these are not typically homogeneous endpoints, they're heterogeneous endpoints. And of course, there are multiple technologies that you want to support here, including AI. And then there's a lot of reporting. Alex Muggy talked about some of the reporting that's already mandated. There have been a number of bills in the last several sessions of Congress on additional reporting and performance measurement. And so if you look at all of this, the real question, I think, when you start out with prior auth, because, let's face it, many of us are starting out, is really a platform choice. And 1UP would submit to you, this is obviously our view of the world and self-serving, so disclaimer there for sure. Our view of the world is you're going to need something very much like the modern lakehouse architecture that all of the big players in the rest of the economy are using. A lot of boxes here in this wedding cake diagram, but the key things are that modern lake houses, and these are all built, by the way, on open source components. So you're not locked in by stuff. This is all open source running on the cloud, has very heterogeneous data. So all kinds of different sources. Many of you may have seen NCQA's pivot to electronic clinical data systems in the last few weeks. So this is going to be the same platform that gets you your HEDIS scores, which are almost the definition of heterogeneous data, but it's all going to be digital. They're going away from the primary source verification and that whole chart audit stuff. So you have in your lake house, you have the various zones. So the raw data ingest zone, we run Spark pipelines to take all of this data and clean it up. We already do that at vast scale. We have a last count, which was actually a while ago, 35 million patients where we clean up the data from payers in this. And then this is formatted into FHIR. It can be held in other data structures, and you can have any analytics you want, whether it's classic machine learning. We do some work with Ricky Sahu, the founder of 1UP, who has Gen Health that does amazing work with generative AI to do prior authorization reporting. And then all of this comes out as APIs, whether it is the CMS 0057 APIs that Alex talked about or the other APIs that are there and required from HEDIS. So let me turn it over to Jeremy, and he can show you a little bit about our gateway approach and show you a demo of how this all works.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Hey, everyone. My name is Jeremy Yoon. I'm the senior product manager here at 1UP, and really excited to talk to you all today about how our modern platform that you just saw not only empowers the Access APIs, I do want to touch on that a little bit, but also ultimately empowers our electronic prior auth solution and our workflow that I'm going to talk to you about in a little bit more detail here. Just zooming out here, we know that prior authorization is maybe the most hot button issue within 057, but there are other APIs as well. And so just to give a plug that, ultimately our approach to our CMS 005 solution consists of having all the APIs for compliance delivered as a single integrated solution for interoperability using the same foundational components and concepts that you saw on the screen before. And so, just highlighting a couple key areas, some of these more relevant for the Access API, some of these, more relevant for prior authorization, but we have a flexible data ingestion and conversion pipeline. And so we've got various ways in which we can get your data, transform that into ultimately being accessible by the FHIR APIs. We also have a very robust and extensive network of payer, provider, and different third-party app endpoints that we fully own and manage. We have robust access controls, management, and data filtering capabilities. And ultimately, as well, we have a pretty nifty console that we're working on that will enable you to see all the API usage reporting, and also for prior auth specifically, some of the kind of key metrics that are a part of 0057, the ruling as well, and in terms of just giving you as a payer and as a platform more insight into how your prior auths are being used. And so, diving back into a little bit more of a flow diagram, I've got a video demo here that will put some of this into real world usage. But ultimately, we have a very modular approach to our solution. And the architecture diagram that you see here is you can kind of see it as a high level slice of the picture that you saw a couple slides ago. But this really represents how our modern data lakehouse architecture is the foundation to our ePA solution. We think that at the end of the day, prior authorization needs to be supported by better data, by good data. And in the case of prior authorization, which is mainly a transactional workflow, there are still key data elements and still key areas where data needs to be introduced in order for the end-to-end workflow to work. And so, at the end of the day, I think there are many difficulties, many kind of road bumps along the way to having the ePA APIs work in the way that they do. But we really think that one of the core issues is to tackle in this prior auth landscape is all the many-to-many connections that need to happen. And so obviously we've got an unlimited number of EHRs that need to be able to connect into various payer APIs. But on the payer front as well, as Don alluded to a little bit ago, a lot of the customers that we're talking to have multiple systems, or they're using, some of our friends on the call from MCG or Interqual or other kinds of clinical questionnaires or policies that they need to pull in during the workflow. And so our solution integrates with all those different vendors, systems, works with the payer to ensure that we have the right logic set up to really ultimately make this as seamless as possible. Ultimately, not just for the payer systems and those who are responsible for being compliant, but also really thinking about, at the end of the day, how can we make this as easy as possible to use from the provider perspective within their EHRs. And so I really want to highlight a little bit more on our intelligent routing. And we really think that this is some of the core features that are a part of our solution. Thinking a little bit or going a little bit deeper into what that means. For EHRs and providers, this means that we have a global registration endpoint that makes setup as easy as possible while handling routing to the payer system on our end, meaning we've got one set of links that somebody is going to have access to for CRD, DTR, and PAS. And then from there, as long as the EHR is hitting that link and giving us the right information, we'll take it and send the request to the right payer system. As I touched on already, we're going to own the routing to external systems, sending prior authorizations to decisioning entities, or querying them or functioning as a pass-through during the flow for coverage, medical policies, et cetera. And ultimately, we also have the ability to ingest business rules on our platform as well. A lot of payers we talk to, they've got a kind of PA checkpoint products that exist today, or they have a spreadsheet that somebody has to manually query to look up, what's the payer's rules for this particular procedure. And so ultimately we can ingest those on our platform, and we could either be the source of truth for those. If you give us the coverage information, we could query that, or we can function as a pass-through over to whatever system it is. And we also know that there are different kinds of routing systems. We have a lot of Blues plans that we work with and talk to. There's Blue Card routing. There's other kinds of, potentially you're part of an HIE or a QHIN, and the prior authorization needs to come and flow through there. And ultimately, we have a system that is going to be able to plug into all the right places. And so that was enough talking. We've got a little demo. You're going to hear my voice again, but this is pre-recorded only a couple days ago. But sometimes getting on a live demo is a little bit risky. So we've got a demo, high level, of just our workflow here, showing our registration workflow and showing what it looks like for a provider to actually use these APIs here. So I've got that teed up for you now.
Before providers can use the prior authorization APIs in their EHR workflow, they need to first get access to those endpoints. 1UP provides a seamless self-service registration experience for providers and their EHR systems that enables them to easily get access. The registration flow is also secure, with proper vetting to ensure that only validated providers can access the payer systems. Once a provider is ready to use the APIs, they create an account with 1UP. After creating an account, the user gets immediate access to our sandbox environment, where they can create a test client and get access to our test endpoints and documentation to verify connectivity. Once the provider is ready to use our production endpoints, they will go through a vetting process by 1UP. Once the provider has been confirmed, they will get access to our global production endpoints and also see which payers are onboarded on our platform. This means that if a provider is connecting to multiple payers that are all 1UP customers, they only need one set of endpoints rather than several unique links. Now that the provider or EHR has access to the 1UP endpoints, they can configure their EHR to trigger them during a provider's workflow. In this example, the user is setting up the CRD endpoint to be triggered during the order sign CDS hook. Once the user enters the endpoint and selects a few settings, the EHR is now configured to utilize the payer's prior authorization APIs and seamlessly call and receive information during a provider's workflow, all within their EHR system. In this example, the provider starts by recording a new patient visit. During the visit, the provider has determined that the patient needs a certain procedure. This is the first of many touch points in this workflow where a provider truly experiences burden reduction. Rather than having to call a payer's team or look up information in a portal, the provider can sign an order within the EHR, knowing that they will get a response back from the payer within seconds about the requested procedure. In the background, the EHR has triggered 1UP's CRD API using the order sign hook, which 1UP then forwards to the correct payer system to determine coverage and the need for prior authorization. In this scenario, the payer system has returned that prior authorization is not required for this procedure, enabling the provider to continue treating their patient without having to spend valuable time chasing down a response. Here we can see the call that was sent to 1UP with all the relevant information per the CRD implementation guide. And this next screen is the response from the payer system that 1UP forwarded to the EHR that the EHR then rendered for the provider to see. Ultimately, a simple task that could have taken upwards of several hours was reduced to a few seconds, showing the power of APIs and modern healthcare technology and truly reducing the provider's burden.
So yeah, that was a quick demo. Ultimately, the system here, I think just a couple callouts, if you noticed in the API calls, our endpoint was the one that was plugged into the HR. We forwarded the request over to 1upHealth that was representing a payer in Blue Cross Blue Shield, Minnesota. So again, that just shows the power of having a routing layer and a translation service in the middle, because then the EHRs themselves and the providers don't have to actually have Itility's endpoint directly. They can send it to our endpoint and we can then forward it to the right place. So we've got just a minute here left. Don, do you have any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think it really is, as we sort through what is in prior auth today and what will happen in the future, I think a lot of this you're going to want to think about the entire workflow and the entire platform and the surround. And do you have the power to employ all of these technologies? Because the reality is the rules are going to morph, the things we have to do are going to morph, the reporting is going to morph. And so it's the plasticity of your system that I think is really going to be powerful. FHIR is a great tool to help that happen.
Well, thank you, Don and Jeremy.